Hello, this is Dan Buchanan, the history guy of Brighton, Ontario. Welcome to The Mystery of HMS Speedy, a video that delves into the search for the remains of the Speedy conducted by Ed Burtt in the early 1990s. It contains original clips from the ROV testing video of 1989, as well as images of artifacts found during the survey work of 1990, 91, and 92. The history guy adds commentary in order to explain the context of each artifact and its potential importance to the Speedy project. In the summer of 1989, Ed Burtt and his crew were testing a new model of underwater remotely operated vehicle called the Sea Otter over Dobbs Bank southeast of Presqu'île Point. Ed's company, Ocean Scan Systems, was an agent for Fishers of Florida, who sold underwater exploration equipment, and it was normal for them to check out a new product in real conditions. They towed the device in the water as they crisscrossed Dobbs Bank and watched the images of the lake floor appear on the monitor. At the same time, the images were being stored on a VHS tape. That night, Ed took the VHS tape home and reviewed the contents out of curiosity. It was then that he saw items on the ground in the video that he thought might be from a very old shipwreck. Only a few weeks before, a diver had recovered a coin dated 1732 from the shallowest point on Dobbs Bank. Taken together, these finds, along with Ed's long-standing knowledge that HMS Speedy may have been lost in this area, led him to believe that the remains of Speedy might be right there on Dobbs Bank. Ed showed the video to a professional marine archaeologist who agreed that further investigation was warranted. Survey licenses were issued and underwater survey work was done on Dobbs Bank during the diving seasons of 1990, 91, and 92. Further details about this work are available in my book and the video series about HMS Speedy. Several years later, after all the diving was done and Ed was still trying to drum up financial support for more exploration on the Speedy site, he created a promotional VHS tape that included clips from the 1989 ROV testing, along with his own voiceover to explain what was being shown. Ed passed away in the fall of 2017, and then in the fall of 2018, a VHS tape was included in the box of documents that were given to me by Ed's family. In 2019, I had the contents of the VHS tape converted to high-res digital format so that it would be easier to manage on my computer. After all of that, some of the clips from Ed's original tape are shown in this video. The content of the VHS tape in Ed's collection had two major parts. First was about 45 minutes of shipwreck diving that had nothing at all to do with the Speedy. Second, there was about 20 minutes of video clips regarding the Speedy, mostly from the 1989 ROV testing. For the following video, I have extracted small clips of the Speedy material, left Ed's voiceover, and added some supporting information for context. The viewer should be aware of several issues regarding this material. First, the original video was not created for you or me to marvel at. It was shot during a routine testing procedure where the priority was to exercise the device and determine if it was working according to spec. The video being recorded was largely ignored during several hours of running the device, and it was part of the system's function to record the images on a VHS tape. What made it extraordinary, however, was Ed Burtt's curiosity. We should also be aware that Ed Burtt created his VHS tape for promotional purposes long after the 1989 video was recorded and the survey work had been completed in the early 1990s. Examples of this are evident when Ed mentions the Pinnacle Rock in relation to drag marks in some of the clips. This clearly indicates that Ed had, by that time, developed the full story of what he believed may have happened to the Speedy. Pinnacle Rock was the term many Brighton folks used for the large rock that local lore said was once on the shallowest point on Dobbs Bank, until the Speedy was lost. It is part and parcel of Ed's story. A word of warning. Many of these clips are very foggy, and it is difficult to make out what Ed wants us to see. Visibility in the water over Dobbs Bank is routinely bad, and the history of this video content does not help its visual clarity. On the other hand, it is all we have, and it's amazing we have it at all. Now, let's look at the first clip, which shows what Ed believed to be a section of decking or hull of the ship, covered in moss with other items around. Here's Ed.
Distinct piece of the hull coming up here. We can clearly see the square ends of the ribs and timbers. On the left-hand side, on the bottom, in the sand, we can see a square outline. It almost looks like the top off a stove, since there's a round opening, looks like a lid.
Here's an example of something that needs the attention of professional marine archaeologists. There may be planks or ribs under the moss here, and there may be pieces of a stove in front, but we can't say for sure until someone investigates using proper scientific methods and tools. We should remember this for all the items Ed talks about. Drag marks were important in Ed's telling of the Speedy story. He believed that, after the violent collision with the rock, heavy pieces of the ship gradually sank to the bottom while still under the momentum of the nor'easter, leaving distinctive gouges in the natural moss and silt of the bottom before coming to rest. Ed was confident that the drag marks he highlighted were made by parts of the Speedy. Here are some examples in his own words.
Anchor drag mark where the anchor plowed into the bottom and cut a groove, clearly seen here. The anchor drag line groove in the bottom of Lake Ontario from the pinnacle rock caused by the HMS Speedy. Here we can clearly see where the anchor is dragged.
The next clip shows what Ed believed might be a brass lantern, sitting on the sand beside some moss. It certainly does not look like it belongs here, but archaeologists would have to determine exactly what it is.
We believe this to be a brass lantern that's sticking out of the sand and moss. We can see a square frame with bright yellow brassy finish and a round loop on it. It's showing dead center there right now.
There were several pieces of chain found during the survey work, and Ed was concerned about the type of chain he saw and whether it might help date the wreckage he was finding. The next clip is an example of what Ed called Dlink Chain, which he believed would be used with the anchors of a ship from the time of the Speedy.
We have part of an anchor and some anchor chain coming up. As the camera pans to the left, you will see it come into view. It's a black Dlink Chain. There it is, right there on the bottom left.
Ed and his crew were fascinated by the shiny items they saw on the ground quite often. It was thought that these were brass buttons, possibly the acorn-shaped type that lined the uniforms of officers of the Provincial Marine. Terry Coons said that on really sunny days in shallower water, he saw several of these in clusters, glinting in his eye as he looked down on them from above. The next clip shows just one of the buttons they encountered during the survey work.
And a acorn brass military button in the right-hand corner, moving into dead center, right at the very bottom. There it is, right at the very bottom. There we are there. It's sort of orange peely on the top and it's acorn shaped. Coming up here, the ROV comes up and we see more wreckage. And right dead center of the bottom is a clay pipe. Been predated 1800 and a pair of eyeglasses. There's a triangle black square boarding axe. There we are right there. We can see the end of it. And this is wreckage on the left covered in moss.
Hold on a minute. Let's go back to the clay pipe and spectacles. Here is a still of that same scene. The professional marine archaeologists told Ed that the clay pipe and spectacles date to the early 1800s. In the video, the Sea Otter turned right, and Ed mentioned a boarding axe sticking up out of the moss. Terry Coons told me that they later realized there were two other items in this picture. On the left side, we can see a cannonball, and just behind it, a glass bottle, which still has its cork. Both of these items could also date from the early 1800s. The cannonball is the same as the others found in the debris field, and the glass bottle, made of black glass, was typical of those used to hold ginger beer, a favorite beverage for sailors of the Provincial Marine. This image is one of the most compelling reasons for professional marine archaeologists to take a close look at this site. Ed was very excited to come across what he believed were a pair of moccasins with a piece of chain underneath one of them. He speculated that these moccasins may have been worn by Agatonnicut, who had been chained in the hold of the Speedy before it left York. If the Speedy met its end in this area, one might expect to find something like this. Makes sense, at least according to Ed.
As we move ahead in the background, we can see two pair of moccasins. There's a piece of chain and a ball running off to the right. There's the moccasins, and we can see distinctly the chain link running to the right.
An unusual box-like object lying on its side did not stump Ed, since he knew immediately that it was a canister full of ball shot. One end of the canister was gone, and the balls were very obvious. HMS Speedy was a gunboat, and its standard armament would include cannon, cannonballs, and canister shot. Here's the clip.
We have a bottle here. See it on the right-hand corner, and canister shot on the bottom left here, and you actually see the purple color of the round balls inside the canister.
Here's the first cannonball they spotted. Early in this clip, Ed was describing one of the trenches that he believed was a drag mark from the Speedy. And then the Sea Otter moves to the right a bit and reveals a small cannon called a carronade. This type of cannon was common on British armed merchant ships, as well as small military ships in the late 17 and early 1800s. The carronade and the canister shot and the cannonballs seen in Ed's video match well with the armaments that would have been installed on HMS Speedy.
White object here we believe to be a coin. Cannonball clearly seen here stuck laying on the rocks. Gold ring. Very bottom center of the screen.
One of Ed's favorite discoveries was the chest. The video clip is not very clear, but this still image shows what Terry Coons saw on several visits to the site. This design of chest was common in the late 1700s, with the ends extending up over the lid, which closed between them. On seeing the chest, Ed Burtt thought it might contain 6 copies of the statutes of Upper Canada, which we know were on the Speedy headed for the magistrates of Newcastle District. If that were the case, the documents would be mush by now, but it's fun to speculate. Here the chest is sitting on a clean landscape, but Terry Coons said on another occasion the chest was almost buried in sand and silt. Dobbs Bank is a very dynamic place, and the explorers were constantly challenged by changing conditions. Terry Coons was particularly intrigued by the padlock, and wondered what the owner was trying to protect. We will likely never know. The box of documents I received from Ed's family in the fall of 2018 included still images that were taken during the survey work in 1990, 91, and 92. Here are a few of them. The divers first thought these might be logs, but on closer examination found that they were masts. They were close together on the shallow area on the north side of Dobbs Bank. Their dimensions were identical, including the tapered end, which we can see in the second image. That's the end that was installed into the deck. HMS Speedy was a twin-mast schooner, and the dimensions and design of these items match well with the documents in the Archives of Ontario that show plans for British gunboats built at Point Frederick near Kingston in the late 1790s and early 1800s. The survey work revealed several examples of what Ed called dead-eyes. These were round wooden devices with grooves and holes for ropes to run through in different directions. They acted as pivot points and adjustment tools in the rigging that would be common to any sailing ship in the late 1790s. Ed loved to describe at length how dead-eyes would be used in the sailing of a ship. He always ended by saying that the rigging of HMS Speedy would have contained several dead-eyes similar to the ones he found on Dobbs Bank. Of all the items revealed during the survey work on Dobbs Bank, the most important may be the bell. This is the best image we have of the bell. It is covered in thick moss, but the outline of a large iron bell is obvious, resting beside some rocks. Terry Coons spoke at length about diving down to this item, about his excitement when it became clear on seeing it up close that it was very likely a ship's bell. He stood over this item and wondered whether the name HMS Speedy was there under all that moss. It was common practice to engrave the name of the ship on the bell, and there was great anticipation that this one artifact might reward their hard work by proving that they were dealing with the wreck of the Speedy. However, "Do not disturb" was in effect, and the entire project might be in jeopardy if artifacts were disturbed in any way. As a result, Terry Coons did not scrape the moss off the bell. Of all the artifacts he saw during the Speedy project, the one that bothers him the most to this day is the bell. Does it say HMS Speedy under the moss on the side of this bell? Sadly, we may never know. On the other hand, it may be the first item that professional marine archaeologists could focus on in order to determine if the artifacts Ed Burtt found on Dobbs Bank are connected to the Speedy. Clearly, there is a path forward if we can find the will to solve the mystery of HMS Speedy.